Andy Pressman, and on behalf of the Board of Supervisors and staff, I would like to welcome you to the 2020 annual meeting for the Cheshire County Conservation District. As you know, this meeting is being held virtually due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite the many challenges this pandemic has created for all of us, this meeting is a celebration of all of the great work that the Cheshire County Conservation District has achieved over this past year. This is also a special time in that we are celebrating 75 years of conservation work in Cheshire County and in the state of New Hampshire. I am honored that you are joining us to mark these special moments, and more importantly, to recognize that each of you have had an impact in the successes of the Conservation District over the many years and in helping conserve our natural resources. In thinking about the past several months and the impacts the pandemic has had on me, my family, my friends, and you all, my community, I can't help to think about this place we call home. I cannot imagine being in a place where my family nor I were able to spend so much time since March outdoors, in the woods, and on the mountains. I'm not sure how my kids would have survived the summer without being able to swim, kayak, or fish our lakes and rivers. And I surely can't imagine living in a place that did not have such strong support for local agriculture. Farmers in Cheshire County adapted to make sure that our neighbors had and continue to have access to fresh and nutritious food. And they have done this while having to quickly implement protocols to make sure that everyone remains safe. This is truly a celebration. As you will see in the following videos for the annual meeting, the programs and education that the Conservation District provides has been instrumental in how my family and I have tried to stay positive and somewhat grounded throughout the pandemic. And just like all of us, the Conservation District staff has had to quickly adapt as well to the challenges brought on by the pandemic. Amanda Littleton and Lola Bobrowski have worked so hard to make sure that workshops are still happening, that equipment is still being made available for farmers and gardeners, that our veterans and underserved neighbors are able to afford shopping with our local farms. Amanda and Lola, this is a celebration of your dedication and hard work to conservation practices and to the mission of the Conservation District. I want to thank all of our supervisors and associate supervisors for the Conservation District. You all are the backbone of the district and continue to support the needs of landowners, farmers and gardeners, foresters, and others who are concerned about conservation and the impacts of climate change in the Monadnock region. Your actions may seem small, but the impact is long-lasting. Whether it's making equipment available for dairy farmers during the pandemic, helping build a seed and tool lending library at the Keene Public Library, organizing the building of a new skidder bridge, or offering technical assistance to landowners to install wildlife and pollinator habitat. I want to thank all of our friends at USDA Farm Service Agency and the Natural Resources Conservation Service, particularly the Walpole office. We're grateful for your support, and we look forward to continuing our partnership and seeing you soon. I also want to thank the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Districts for all of its support. Today, we celebrate all of your successes over 75 years of conservation efforts in New Hampshire. Some of these successes will be shared by the keynote address that will explore 75 years of conservation in Cheshire County. And finally, I want to thank all of you for your continued support and engagement in the Conservation District. You all are what truly makes this place special, whether it's during a pandemic or not. Regardless, we know that we have a lot more work to do. We must continue to work together to make sure that our natural resources are managed appropriately. With this in mind, I want to ask that you please consider a donation to the Cheshire County Conservation District. I know things are tough right now, but your financial support is ever so important now as funding sources often utilized for district programming may no longer be available as a result of the pandemic. I know that the mission of the Conservation District is important to you. So I also want to ask that if you have the time to please consider attending the district's monthly meetings, which are happening virtually while the staff and board continue to implement social distancing. And if you are inclined, we welcome your interest in joining the Board of Supervisors and Associate Supervisors. Thanks for being a part of this very special annual meeting. We have much to celebrate, including the Educator and Cooperators of the Year. I hope you enjoy the following presentations, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you all for joining us for this virtual meeting. I'm Amanda Littleton, and I've had the good fortune of managing the Conservation District for the past 13 years and working with our incredible community on conservation projects. This meeting marks 75 years of working with farmers and forest landowners in Cheshire County to steward natural resources. It's really exciting to be celebrating this milestone with you. So many of our partners, volunteers, and friends who are instrumental in shaping the activities of the Conservation District. We have a lot to be grateful for here in Cheshire County, a strong, caring, resilient community, and a beautiful place to call home. Tonight, we are delighted to celebrate and honor Wingate Farm and Steve Roberge as our cooperator and educator of the year. Each awardee embodies the mission of the Conservation District, and we are thankful for their hard work and dedication to the land that help make our region such a beloved place. I would like to recognize the Cheshire County Conservation District Board of Supervisors. They are Amy Bodwell, Bill Fosher, Richard Meller, Andy Pressman, John Treat, Chris Bowen, Tom Beaudry, Holly and Chris Gowdy, Todd Horner, Frank Hunter, Tracy Look, Michael Neary, Sarah Powell, Peter Renzelman, and Pete True. The board provides leadership by setting the goals and direction of the Conservation District, and they are the eyes and ears of the organization in the community, making sure our programs are relevant and addressing the most pressing needs of the local land user. I would also like to thank Lola Bobrowski, our outreach coordinator for the Conservation District, for the enthusiasm and skills she brings to the organization and her tireless efforts in communicating with community members about the conservation work happening in the region. Now I'd like to just take a few moments to share with you some of the highlights of the work that we've been doing in 2020. At the Conservation District, our strategic plan outlines 4 goals, of which all of our work falls into. Now I'm going to offer some highlights for the year in each focus area. Each of the projects I will share are built on a foundation of strong partnerships with other nonprofit and government organizations. We work hand in hand with many organizations to make these programs possible. I'll start with our work focused on improving soil health and reducing erosion. The principles that we work from in this arena are the following: minimize disturbance or tillage, and maximize living roots in the soil cover and biodiversity. To these ends, we continue to offer our soil health equipment rental fleet to farmers. We now have 10 implements with a value of over $185,000, and this growing season has been the busiest year yet of use. In 2020, because of the unprecedented economic challenges the dairy industry faces during COVID-19, the CCCD board waived all fees for dairy farmers as a gesture of support for these important local partners in conservation. As a result of farmer interest, we continue to expand the management tools we have available for vegetable producers of all scales. In 2020, we have secured funding to acquire a soil steamer to help growers in the region with an alternative, chemical-free way to manage weeds, disease, and pests in high tunnels. Throughout the coming year, there will be targeted on-farm demonstrations and workshops on high tunnel management and on the soil steamer. This will then be available to farms to use in the 2021 growing season and beyond. This is a partnership with UNH Cooperative Extension, NCAT, Piccadilly Farm, and with funding from USDA SARE, NRCS, and NHACD. Next up, I'll share a couple of the programs that we have been working on to improve water quality. Conservation districts statewide have been instrumental in an effort to protect water quality. Dairy farmers are choosing to invest in improvements in their equipment to transition to no-till, and we're helping to share the costs, covering 75% of the costs of corn planter retrofits. Over the past 2 years, we've been able to provide $50,000 to 15 farms in New Hampshire, and this program will continue into 2021. Now, this program goes hand in hand with an increased focus on cover cropping, and together, these efforts protect our surface waters. Now, shifting gears from on the farm to in the rivers, on September 26th, 45 volunteers pulled out over 1,500 pounds of trash from the Beaver Brook in Keene and the Ashwalet River in Keene and Swansea. Despite the pandemic, there were school groups, church groups, as well as individuals and families who came out to safely clean up our waterways. This is a partnership with the City of Keene, the Ashwalet River Local Advisory Council, Moosewood Ecological, and the New Hampshire Waterworks Association of Young Professionals. And together, they make this happen each and every year. And it's part of a larger effort through the Connecticut River Conservancy's Source to Sea cleanup. Stewardship for the wildlife of the region is always something near and dear to my heart. And here are a few programs that have been underway in 2020. 2 new programs that look to support native pollinators in the region got started this year. Thanks to the generosity of a local donor, we started a new annual grant program for landowners of small tracts of land who are interested in improving wildlife habitat on their property. This is called the Conservation Opportunity Fund. And it will be an annual opportunity, and eligible activities include creating pollinator habitat, installing rain gardens, and creating and maintaining early successional habitat. In 2020, we awarded $5,500 to 4 awardees. The second program comes at supporting native pollinators from a different angle. It's to work with fruit and berry producers to reduce pesticide use through integrated pest management. We are teaming up with other conservation districts to offer an innovative statewide cost share program for farms interested in IPM. For example, a berry producer being negatively impacted by spotted-winged Drosophila could work with us to purchase netting at a fraction of the retail cost. This work will be complemented by technical assistance and education from UNH Cooperative Extension, the Xerces Society, and NRCS. Funding for this work has been provided by USDA NRCS. In 2020, we continued a partnership with the Antioch Bird Club, USDA, and the Windham County Conservation District in Vermont to offer a unique educational series called Birding on the Farm. Our focus is for participants to leave the workshops with enhanced understanding of the role farms play in providing wildlife habitat and also better understanding the resource management practices happening on farms. I'd also like to mention that through a partnership with Longview Forest and Peter Renselman Forestry Management Services, we are building a new skidder bridge that will be available in Cheshire County. This is a tool that can be used during a timber harvest to protect wildlife habitat and water quality in woodland streams. Now moving on to our final focus area, farm viability. And here we work to increase food production and expand markets to help farmers be more profitable. To kick off the conversation on farm viability, I will share that the Monadnock Locavores, through the Jeffrey P. Smith Farm Scholarship Program, were able to send 15 children to farm camp of their choice. This program helps youth develop a stronger connection to agriculture and the natural world, and hopefully inspiring the next generation of farmers and local food supporters. The next couple of programs we have focus on expanding markets for local food producers. The Granite State Market Match program allows folks utilizing food stamps or SNAP to buy from farmers and double their dollars. For every SNAP dollar they spend, they are given another dollar to buy fruits and vegetables from local growers. This gets high quality food to folks who need it the most, and it creates a new market opportunity for our regional farms. We added a new farm location in 2020, bringing it to 13 places in Cheshire County where this program can be utilized. Many limited income community members are not eligible for SNAP, so can't take advantage of Market Match. But the Farm Share program provides limited income Monadnock region residents with the opportunity to support their local CSA or community supported agriculture farmer and receive reliable, high quality produce on a regular basis all season long at half the price. 9 community-supported agriculture produce farms in the region came together in 2020 to work with the district to ensure that this program was possible. 34 households participated, and we look forward to growing the program next year. For a third year, with support from Cheshire Medical Center's Center for Population Health, we offered a Veterans Appreciation Month in partnership with the Hinsdale Farmers Market, the Farmers Market of Keene, and new this year, the Team Jaffrey Farmers Market. This is a program with the goal to offer our gratitude and appreciation to veterans for their service for protecting our freedoms, and also an opportunity to grow markets for farms in the region. $12,000 in vouchers were distributed to 170 veterans in September this year. The Monadnock Food Co-op Farm Fund has a mission to support local farmers in increasing sustainable food production and wholesale sales to contribute to a thriving local farm economy. We are their partner in this program and administer the grant. And now, in its fourth year, we've been able to provide over $54,000 in grants to 13 farms. And in 2021, we are hoping to be able to offer $30,000 to farmers. In 2020, the CCCD made strides to launch a community-supported Solar for Farms project in the Monadnock region. We are working with Sun Moon Farm in Rindge, New Hampshire, and Revision Energy to construct a 100-kilowatt array. This will allow multiple farms to net meter and support solar while stabilizing their electricity prices for the next 25 years. Currently, we're seeking interested farms to participate. This project would not have been possible without the support of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and the Thomas W. Haas Fund, and the pro bono legal assistance provided by the firms Nixon Peabody and Orrin Reno. The final program that I will mention today is the New Hampshire Farm Future Fund. We launched this program in 2020 in partnership with our state association, Land for Good, and the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund. It has a mission to provide funding for farm viability planning in concert with the conservation of important agricultural soils. This program leverages the singular opportunity of putting a conservation easement on farmland to also invest in the future viability of that farm business. The goal of the fund is to ensure that farmland is conserved, productive, and available for future generations. Funding's been provided by You Have Our Trust Fund, the Madison Fund of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, as well as the generosity of individual donors. We were able to grant out $90,000 in 2020 to partnering land trusts, and $100,000 will be available in 2021. We're excited about this program because it's an integrated approach to funding farm viability, farmland conservation, and farmland access, and fills an important niche in building the capacity of agricultural service providers in the state of New Hampshire. Well, I hope this gave you a taste of the kind of work we are doing at the Conservation District with partners to continue strong stewardship of natural resources and the promotion of strong agricultural businesses. We look forward to continuing this tradition of working with you all and caring for our land and water resources over the next 75 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, for that wonderful overview of all that we've been up to at the CCCD this year. I'm Lola Bobrowski, Outreach Coordinator for the Cheshire County Conservation District, and I'd just like to thank you all again for being here tonight. Now that we've heard a little bit about what the CCCD has been up to, we'd like to share some partner updates from our friends at the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. We're going to hand this over back to Amanda to have a conversation with Wendy Ward, District Conservationist of the NRCS, co-located with us in Walpole, New Hampshire.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Amanda. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you so much for joining us to celebrate 2020 conservation's efforts here in Cheshire County between our two organizations. I want to start out by just thanking you genuinely for your partnership and commitment to conservation in this region. You and your staff do so much for the farmers and forest landowners in Cheshire County each year, every year, all year, especially during this tough year during 2020. So thank you very much for everything. And I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about some of the highlights over this past year.
Well, thank you for that, Amanda. We feel the same way about the district. NRCS here just loves working with the district, and our partnership is super valuable to us. And as you said, 2020 was a year like no other, and it wasn't just because of COVID. Here at NRCS in Walpole, Stephen Pitlick, who many people remember, moved on in February, and I became DC. And we welcome some new staff. We have a new program assistant, Julia Myers, and a new soil conservationist, Justin Burrow. And we still have here, everyone remembers, Mary Ellen Cannon, Heidi Kinesco, and John Meadow. So we have a full office.
Congratulations on your promotion. Very well deserved.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really exciting to be in the district conservationist position here in the office now. And during COVID, we've had some challenges, but we've stayed open. We've been working with people, you know, in a different way, teleworking. So we got a lot of work done since COVID and in 2020. Of course, we had to cancel workshops and put those sort of things on hold. But I was really excited to work with the district on the Conservation Opportunity Fund that you had for working with people to do some wildlife habitat on their properties. That was super fun to work with you and the members on that. And the birding on the farm that we started. We did a great field trip last fall and a nice field trip this spring. Lots of people, and hoping to start that up again because that's something that, of course, is close to my heart, birds.
Yeah, we're going to start that again in the spring of 2021. I know folks will be excited to join us out on the different farms to see the birds and also what great habitat that farms can provide for the birds in the region.
Right,
So
and learning about the farming business and practice that goes on the farms. So yeah, it's great. And like I said, we had a lot of people show up. But in 2020, the NRCS district did the NRCS did a lot of work in Cheshire County for, we obligated 31 brand new contracts in the Farm Bill conservation programs. And this was covering over 2,000 acres, almost 3,000 acres in the county, and allocated over $500,000 worth of dollars in new contracts. And we implemented a lot of practices from existing contracts, and I'd like to share some pictures of some of those practices, because pictures are always great to see what's going on.
That sounds perfect. I'm sure everybody will be excited to see them.
So in 2020, NRCS implemented over 200 conservation practices in Cheshire County, and this was on over 3,000 acres and totaled about $600,000 conservation dollars. And we like to talk about our top practices. Usually we do like a top 10 of practices. And so these are some of these highlights here. The first practice, totaling over 1,600 acres, was nutrient management. And nutrient management is managing the amount and the form and timing of application of manure and nutrients and soil amendments. And this is something that really improves water quality. It helps to reduce pollutants entering surface waters. And the second practice was a practice that was a lot of fun. We don't do these too often. It was stream habitat improvement. And this practice is to restore some wildlife habitat features for the in-stream for fish and aquatic organisms while solving erosion problems on the stream bank. And this is on the Ashwellet River, and this is part of the construction of it. You can see that we do have to strip off all the vegetation to get this project in, but we're not really shaping back the land so much. And all of those tree stumps, the tree trunks you can see in the middle, are driven into the bank and down into the soil. And then in the top right, you can see cribs are built out of timber. And a series of these cribs are placed along the riverbank, and this is going to help slow down the velocity of the water, and it's going to also help stabilize the bank so we can grow some trees on top and restore what we call a riparian buffer, the trees that grow on top of the riverbank. And this is one of the great before and after pictures. You can see that eroding bank on the left, and then you can see it stabilized there on the right with those series of cribs. You can kind of see they look like little teeth going out into the river. And this is another section of it that was further downstream that you can see again those cribs going out in the before and after. So this was a great project that we did, and hopefully next spring we can get some trees planted on there and it will really start to restore the riparian habitat. The next practice that we did quite a lot of was cover crops, and this is something that's really a result of the Soil Health Institute and the districts working more with soil health and our partners. And the cover crops, they're an annual crop that are planted on cropland. So this is something that someone would put in a rotation with, like vegetables or corn. And we like to say keep it covered. So the more you can keep the soil covered, the more healthy it is. And there's a variety of different cover crops that are planted for different reasons. And this slide is showing a few different of the mixes, all the way for a 6-species mix up in the upper left-hand corner over to just doing some winter rye over in the upper right-hand corner. And this is really a practice that we've been expanding and doing more and more every year. Another one of the big practices is pasture and hayland seeding. And this isn't just reseeding a whole new field. A lot of this has to do with rejuvenating, as we like to call it, hay fields and pastures. So we'd be adding lime and nutrients and overseeding some clovers or other species to make them, to extend their production and make them, produce more food and feed for livestock. And speaking of livestock, we did 70 acres of prescribed grazing. And prescribed grazing is when you have a pasture that you divide it up into different sections to keep forage growing throughout the season, and you rotate your animals throughout the pasture. And to do this type of system, you need to provide fencing. So you can see in the upper center some perimeter fence, and then in the other pictures to the left, you can see temporary fencing that the farmers use to move their livestock throughout these paddocks. And in the upper right-hand corner is an animal trail. Animal trails are important to keep, to help with erosion and keep a nice, dry, muddy-free trail for the animals to walk along. Another big practice is forest management and forest stand improvement. We had about over 1,000 acres on forest management plans written, over 12 plans in Cheshire County last year. And these plans help people do sustainable forestry on their property. We also did actual forest stand improvement where there's weeding and thinning and cutting of trees out of the forest to help improve what we like to call the crop trees, the trees that people are growing for timber, or to do something that is a little bit more wildlife habitat in focus, which is the center picture up at the top. That's a crop tree release. So that tree is released to produce lots of acorns for critters. We also do irrigation management and high tunnels. High tunnels are a pretty popular practice. A lot of the vegetable growers grow them, but as you can see, any crop that's grown in the ground can be grown in a high tunnel. In the center slide, you can see someone growing cut flowers. We also have people who have raspberries or blueberries in their tunnel, along with annual vegetables. They're unheated structures and they help to extend the growing season. The irrigation management are, it's mainly on this slide, we're seeing a soil moisture meter reading. So we can put soil moisture probes in the ground and they can tell how much water is in the ground for the crops, so that a farmer can really manage efficiently the amount of water and timing on when to water, when not to water, and it really helps save energy, and it also helps improve the health of the crops. And then while these practices may not have been practices we do in large acres or spend large amount of dollars on, the pollinator seedings, mulchings, and reverse osmosis are all practices that are really important, and some that the district has put as a priority. The pollinator seedings have been a priority for the Cheshire County Conservation District, and we've been able to fund more of these pollinator seedings by raising that priority in our ranking for our programs. Over on the upper right-hand side, you can see this is a smother of the grass. So that's what we can do. Some people will do a smother instead of a chemical kill to prep the ground for these pollinator seedings. And then in the middle, of course, you can see a beautiful pollinator seeding in Cheshire County. And in the lower left-hand corner is mulching. And again, these are not practices that we do on large acres. This is probably mostly on the vegetable farms, but mulching has become a very popular practice. We do it up with a lot of the vegetable farmers. And in the upper left-hand corner is a picture of a reverse osmosis machine that's used in maple production. And the reverse osmosis removes a lot of water from the sap that comes out of the trees so that there's far less water to boil out of the sap when they're boiling it down for maple syrup. So this reduces energy needed to produce the maple syrup, and it also reduces air emissions, especially if someone is using a wood-fired system, and you can reduce by more than 20% up to 70% of energy, I believe, with these systems. So those are just some of the practices that were the highlights for Cheshire County this year, and we're really looking forward to doing more conservation work with the district and in Cheshire County in 2021.
Thanks, Wendy. That was an excellent overview. It's so many good projects, so many different types of producers in the region. Really cool.
And that was just a small sampling of some of the ones that we do. But yeah, looking forward to more doing, great work. And we really thank you for letting us showcase some of these and the time to come here and talk to you all. But now I'm going to hand it over to our state conservationist for NRCS New Hampshire, Becky Ross, she just started this year, actually only a few months ago. So she's brand new and looking forward to chatting with her some.
Hello everyone, my name is Becky Ross and I am your state conservationist for the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service here in New Hampshire. First, I would like to thank everyone for taking time out of their schedule to participate in the Cheshire County Conservation District annual meeting and for your dedication to conservation. I applaud your efforts to ensuring conservation delivery on the ground and providing opportunities for local outreach and education to youth and adults in your local communities and across the county. It is important that we all work together as we can have greater impacts as a team than individual efforts. Second, I would like to thank the Cheshire County Conservation District for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you all today. As I'm sure you've all picked up by now, I'm not a Granite Stater. I was born and raised in Oklahoma on a 20-acre farm where we had cattle and hogs, along with the occasional horses, goats, and sheep, and of course a large garden. Both sets of grandparents had ties to the land, so agriculture, local produce, and meats have been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I just recently celebrated my 27th year of service with the Soil Conservation Service, or now the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and have had the opportunity to work in 6 previous states. I am now privileged to call New Hampshire home. I have been here since mid-July and have been able to get out and learn about the diverse landscape, agriculture, and forestry across the state, along with some of our challenges and opportunities. The next year will give me time to listen and learn more about the conservation challenges to continue to strengthen our relationship with partners such as the Cheshire County Conservation District and the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Districts, as well as reaching out to others and finding ways we can work together to continue to build on the successes that we've had in the past. For me, partnerships are important and allow us to reach more people and have a larger impact than any one organization working alone. Training of our staff will continue to be a priority to ensure that we can all work with landowners to deliver and implement the Farm Bill here in New Hampshire. Improving water quality, reducing erosion, improving forest health, managing our lands for wildlife, and providing opportunities for local foods will continue to be at the forefront of our conservation technical assistance and our Farm Bill programs. Again, thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to introduce myself. And thank you for your support and your efforts for conservation here in Cheshire County. I applaud your efforts, and I look forward to meeting you all one day in person. Enjoy the rest of your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy and Becky, for that overview of all the great work that NRCS has been doing in 2020, and to Amanda for sharing all that we've been doing at the CCCD this year. We now move into our awards portion of our evening to honor our 2020 Educator and Cooperator of the Year. I hand it to Amanda to present the 2020 Cooperator of the Year, Wingate Farm.
Each year, the Cheshire County Conservation District honors an organization, business, or individual with the Cooperator of the Year award. This is done to celebrate the efforts the recipient has taken to steward the natural resources on their land, in cooperation with the Conservation District and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. This year, we are happy to announce Wingate Farm of Hinsdale, New Hampshire, as our 2020 Cooperator of the Year. Wingate Farm is owned and operated by Olivia Pettingill and Susie Park Sutherland. They have been operating the diversified farm business and stewarding their 60-acre property since 2014. They graze 1,000 hens on 14 acres of pasture, have 1.5 acres of vegetable production, and 1 acre in pollinator habitat. Olivia grew up on the land, which is now home to Wingate Farm, and has spent her whole life gardening and farming in the Connecticut River Valley. She has a deep family connection and strong commitment to the land and local community. She wants to ensure this land is stewarded for future generations to enjoy. Susie grew up in central Missouri, spending all her free time in nature. She had no exposure to agriculture in her early years, but started farming in New England in 2007 upon her college graduation. She has been farming ever since and wouldn't want it any other way. Susie takes inspiration from her role on the farm as a mentor to youth who are looking for a safe and joyful space to explore who they are, their role in agriculture, and the natural world. Agriculture is often a male-dominated profession, and she and Olivia appreciate the opportunity to work with young women to empower them to discover their interests and their passions. Both Olivia and Susie share a deep passion for hard work, being in nature, and continually seeking improvement in their farm practices. Their dedication has been fruitful in creating a business that supports their livelihood and offers a good quality of life. Their primary product is pasture-raised eggs, and they produce this through intensely managed rotational grazing. The hens are moved daily to optimize pasture and animal health and vigor. They also sell vegetables and flowers at farmers markets in Brattleboro, Vermont, and Northampton, Massachusetts. Their main egg market channel is community-supported agriculture, or CSA shares. These are sold through partnerships they have built with produce CSA farms in the region. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, they felt it was critical to find a safe way for the community to access their farm food. Olivia and Susie were quick to adapt and innovate by creating a fresh food pickup option for retail customers interested in ordering online and getting their produce delivered to one of 4 drop locations. This has become a great way for customers to feel secure in their food purchasing and to connect directly to the farm. Caring for the natural resource base on their property is the foundation for their work. In August of 2015, the Pettingill family worked with Mount Grace Land Trust to place a conservation easement on the farm. This will ensure that the property is forever protected from development and will remain farmland in perpetuity. This was done with the USDA NRCS Farm and Ranchland Protection Program. Wingate Farm has also worked with the USDA NRCS through the EQIP program, or the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, to improve soil health, water quality, efficiency of water use, as well as wildlife habitat through implementing the following practices: high tunnels, irrigation wells, Cornell soil health assessments, cover crops and rotation, mulching, pollinator plantings, forest management plans, stream habitat improvement and management, tree and shrub planting, riparian forest buffers, and critical area plantings. Olivia and Susie are committed to improving their pastures for the health of their birds and the future of their farm. To improve the forage quality and quantity, they use manure and wood ash on the fields, and they work to diversify their pastures for the use of the Conservation District's no-till seed drill. They are committed to using reduced tillage practices in their vegetable operation to retain and build organic matter. Bill Fosher, Conservation District Board member, shared the following. Susie and Olivia show a level of dedication to stewardship, quality, and animal welfare that go well beyond best practices. These are examples of how to run a small, diversified farm that just about anyone could learn from and be inspired by. They are keen students of agriculture and are always looking for ways to do a better job. And when not found working on the farm, there's a good chance you're going to find Susie and Olivia cooking, enjoying, and sharing the bounty of their harvest. Together, their hard work and stewardship has created a safe and supportive place for youth, a thriving agricultural business on healthy pastures, and a place that will continue as productive agriculture for generations to come. It is with great honor that the Cheshire County Conservation District presents Wingate Farm as the 2020 Cooperative Farm. Congratulations, Susie.
It is an honor to receive Cheshire County's Cooperator of the Year award. We inherit and care for this land after generations of preceded by colonizers, preceded by native folks, and we have a duty to uphold and tend to this land to the best of our ability. We come from a background of economic, educational, and racial privilege, and have been granted the opportunity to steward this land because the way we've gotten here is not fair or equal, and it is up to us to pursue additional knowledge and skills to have open, decent land stewards. It is a true gift to have a county that is so thoroughly invested in supporting our process of land. We could not have been set on this path without the support of the good people in our community, committed to long-term farmland preservation, soil, lifting up the voices of young female farmers.
The support we have received has given us in allocating farm resources, eased some growing pains as we have expanded enterprises, and underwritten large-scale projects that have helped to secure the health of this property for generations to come. This has implications wide for us as individuals, our families, our immediate communities, and beyond that, when small farms and businesses like ours are able to integrate conservation practices into their operations, we want to give specific thank yous to everyone at NRCS who has worked with us over the years. We truly thank you for everything. Also, we want to thank our community of farmers in Hinsdale, Chester, and Northfield. When we took the leap into farming for ourselves, it seemed like everywhere we looked, there were experienced growers to lend a hand, or a head, or a heart anytime we needed it, and maybe sometimes when we didn't really need it. Without your tremendous project of farming would be a lot less rich and a lot more lonely. We love you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Each year, the Cheshire County Conservation District honors an individual or organization with the Educator of the Year award. This is done to celebrate the efforts that the recipient has undertaken to steward a conservation ethic and awareness through their personal and professional work in whatever form of education that takes. This year, we are happy to announce Steve Roberge as the 2020 Educator of the Year. Steve Roberge has dedicated his career to supporting forestry conservation in the Granite State. For the last 13 years, Steve has served as Cheshire County Forester before transitioning in March 2020 to his current role as the UNH Cooperative Extension State Forestry Specialist. At its core, Steve's work is focused on the education of landowners and the training of foresters. Steve grew up in Berlin, New Hampshire, admiring the White Mountains from his kitchen window. Steve's parents were avid hikers and campers who instilled an outdoor ethic within him that stuck with Steve throughout his entire life. Originally, Steve attended college at UNH with the intention of becoming a game warden, but soon switched his wildlife major to a forestry major after just his second semester. After graduating in 2003 with his forestry degree, Steve attended the Yale School of Forestry from 2003 to 2005. Throughout his schooling, Steve spent his summers researching and measuring coarse woody material, logging what professors called world record hours in woody material data collection. After his time at the Yale School of Forestry and before becoming the UNH Cheshire County Forester, Steve worked for the Connecticut Wildlife Division and did some nonprofit work on a conserved land CSA in Weston, Mass., where he mainly ran the sugary and trails operations of that property. Steve's favorite part about working in the field of forestry is that there's, quote, so much to learn and see. There's a variety of place and work, and he frequently gets to see something different every day. As Steve likes to say, if you're out there and you're not learning anything, you're not looking. UNH foresters are also considered extension educators, making Steve an ideal candidate for this award. County foresters are licensed foresters who don't write management plans or sell timber, but rather provide service and education to landowners. Steve's goal is always to build awareness and fully inform landowners of the wide range of management options available to them, always leaving the final decision up to the landowner. As Steve says, his work is about meeting people where they are at, so he never comes to a landowner's property with an agenda. Steve's goal is simply to connect people to their land to inspired stewardship. This, to Steve, is the most rewarding part of his work, getting folks out onto their properties in a way that is comfortable for them, helping them discover the value held within their land, and hopefully instilling a desire within the landowner to become a better steward of their land. The most difficult part of Steve's work is simply getting folks to know that he and other county foresters across the state are a free and widely available resource. In New Hampshire, there is one forester position for every county, and in Cheshire County, that equates to one forester for approximately 5,000 landowners with 10 plus acres of forest. When utilized, foresters are a valuable resource for landowners, providing site visits, education, follow-up, and guidance all along the way, with the end goal of building a foundational understanding within the landowner and again to inspire future commitment to stewardship. In Steve's newest role as state forestry specialist, he's not out in the woodlots as much as he once was, but this has provided him the opportunities to think more creatively about forestry work in New Hampshire. Through this position, Steve gets to explore new ways to support the county foresters he now oversees. He's developing new projects, writing grants, and working directly with partners to promote forestry conservation throughout the state. We at the CCCD and NRCS are also immensely grateful for Steve's partnership over the years. County foresters have a formal agreement to provide forestry expertise to NRCS staff by assessing projects and properties, as well as training NRCS staff on forestry issues. Steve has also maintained long stability working alongside the CCCD. Over the years, we've partnered numerous times on educational opportunities for the public and supported each other's efforts through shared promotion and outreach, which has allowed us both to reach a wider audience and build greater awareness and support of forestry programs across the county. As if Steve hasn't been busy enough, he He also currently chairs the New Hampshire Forester Licensing Board, is a member of the Northeastern Forest Resources Extension Council and the Hubbard Brook Research Foundation Advisory Council, and is executive committee chair of the Society of American Foresters Granite State Division. Here in the Granite State, as our landscape becomes increasingly more fragmented, we face the potential loss of valuable ecosystem services and the forest land itself. This makes the educational work of county foresters like Steve invaluable to the future of conservation in New Hampshire. It is with great pleasure that the CCCD presents Steve Roberge with the 2020 Educator of the Year Award. Congratulations, Steve. We so value your work.
Hi there. So I'm going to make this somewhat brief just because it's not too often I can take a video with a porcupine feeding behind me. But I would like to thank the Cheshire County Conservation District for this award. I am truly honored to be recognized in Cheshire County for my work with landowners of New Hampshire, with conservation organizations, and with critters like this friendly porcupine here. From building skidder bridges with Amanda, Paul Crosby, Peter Renzelman, Tina Waddell, to washing dishes late night following a landowner forum with Amanda, to just woodlot tours looking at conservation, or looking at logging equipment and things like that. It's been truly an amazing career thus far. I'm not close to done, but I've really enjoyed my time with the Conservation District, working with them, because they've been such great partners. Not only Amanda and Lola, the staff, but also working with their board, bouncing ideas, meeting with them, discussing forestry in Cheshire County. At the same time, I also like to recognize my colleagues with the Cooperative Extension. Without them, the work that I've done could not be possible. Folks like Karen Bennett, the 9 other county foresters that are out there across the state, and also other specialists like Matt Tarr, Amanda Stone, and other folks with Cooperative Extension. So I'm sorry if I missed you, if I didn't list you there, but I'm just very excited about that porcupine in my video. Although Leopold once said, regulating conservation to government is like regulating virtue to the Sabbath. It turns over to professionals what should be a daily work of amateurs. Now, there's a couple things I don't fully agree with that, but I do agree with the whole premise of the idea of landowners, amateurs, essentially working in conservation on their land, in their communities. And that's been my work, is to essentially share the knowledge of conservation, of forestry, of the forest resources of New Hampshire to forest landowners, to the public, to folks who may not be generally exposed to forestry or just think about trees on a daily basis. That's been my life's work, or my goal, to share that information with those folks. And so I'm again honored to be recognized tonight from the Conservation District, and this fellow behind me, as we call at our household, Mr. Quilly, is also happy of the work that Cooperative Extension does, and the work that Cheshire County Conservation District does, and the work that other conservation organizations do throughout the state, so that New Hampshire remains forested, wild, and very much a great place to live in. So again, thank you. Take care.
And now, to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening, I pass it off to Frank Hunter, CCCD board member and farmer at Hillside Springs Farm, CSA, in Westmoreland, New Hampshire.
Congratulations to all of our award recipients. We are lucky to have dedicated conservation stewards like you leading the way in Cheshire County. We're also lucky to have our next speaker here tonight to provide our keynote address. Alan Rumrell has served as the Executive Director of the Cheshire County Historical Society since 1983. Alan is from New Hampshire and a resident of Stoddard, where his family has lived since 1770. He earned his BA in History from Keene State College and an MLS from the University of Rhode Island. Alan has written many articles and 8 books on regional art and history, and has presented over 1,000 local history programs. Tonight, Alan shares with us stories of changes and development in agriculture, forestry, and land conservation in Cheshire County over the last 75 years. We are thankful and excited to have him here. And with that, take it away, Alan.
I've been asked to share some history with you tonight concerning the last 75 years of agriculture, forestry, and land conservation in Cheshire County. These have been the chief focus of the work of the Cheshire County Conservation District since it was founded 75 years ago. This will give us some perspective of how things have changed in those fields and why the CCCD has been involved in them. I will give a brief background on each of these topics to help us understand what the situation was like in Cheshire County in 1945 at the end of World War II. The arrival of European settlers transformed the rural landscape of New Hampshire in the mid-1700s. The early settlers were almost all farmers, and they cleared land for cultivation and pasture, creating small farms to support their families throughout the year. During the 18th and early 19th century, most of these farms were self-sufficient subsistence farms that produced only what the families needed in order to survive. Several factors combined to convince farm families to search for better opportunities elsewhere in the mid to late 19th century. The opening of the Erie Canal and the construction of thousands of miles of railroad lines soon after resulted in inexpensive Western produce, flooding the urban markets of the Northeast. Local farmers could not compete economically. Furthermore, the thin soil in the rocky hill towns became depleted after 2 or 3 generations of supporting crops. Those farmers who stayed here had to specialize to survive. Many of them turned to the production of dairy products. Prior to the mid-1800s, there was no good method to preserve milk for long periods of time or to transport it to market quickly while it was still fresh. Consequently, most excess milk was made into butter and cheese to be sold locally. The introduction of the railroad in southwest New Hampshire revolutionized the transportation of farm produce and especially dairy products. The railroad allowed farmers of New Hampshire to help meet the demand for milk among the growing population of Boston and surrounding towns. Farmers began to add to the usual 2 or 3 cows for home milk production so that they could sell milk commercially. Herds of 40 to 50 cows were soon common as farmers specialized and the New Hampshire dairy industry was born. The shift of population from farms to cities in the 20th century made it necessary to mass produce and improve the quality of milk. The introduction of refrigerated rail cars meant that milk from all over New England could be shipped to the large Hood milk plant in Boston for packaging and distribution without spoiling. Significant inventions such as commercial milk bottles, milking machines, tuberculin tests for cattle, pasteurization equipment, and automatic bottling machines contributed to making milk a healthy and commercially viable product. By the 1940s, the B&M Railroad ran a milk train through Cheshire County every day to collect milk from local dairy farmers. Widespread use of the milking machine during the 20th century provided a more efficient method for the farmer and made it possible to produce a cleaner milk product. Additional technological advances allowed farmers to get more milk from their cows. The resulting competition and difficult market conditions in the 20th century resulted in some farmers increasing the size of their herds to survive, while others sold their cows and left the business for economic reasons. By the 1980s, the number of commercial dairy farms in Cheshire County had decreased dramatically, with the majority of the remaining farms being located in the western towns bordering on the Connecticut River. This is a view of the Barrett farm in Keene. An increasing number of New England farmers turned to poultry as a source of income after the business was introduced in the 1800s. In 1900, New England's hens laid more than 52 million dozen eggs. The production and sale of eggs and chicken meat remained a sideline for most farmers until after World War I. Thereafter, more farmers began to specialize, with some dealing exclusively in poultry. The products were highly marketable and realized high profit margins. In 1945, the value of poultry products in Cheshire County exceeded $2 million. The development of the broiler, a chicken bred and raised specifically for its meat, revolutionized the poultry industry. Eventually, entrepreneurs consolidated feed mill, hatchery, and processing operations, resulting in the beginnings of an integrated industry. Cheshire County farmers could not compete with the rapidly growing commercial broiler industry. By 1952, specially bred meat chickens, broilers, surpassed farm chickens as the #1 source of chicken meat in the United States. New England and Cheshire County chicken farms began to disappear. The romance of apple growing and picking has made apples an important element in agritourism as tourists come to visit orchards and pick their own apples. New England apple orchards now produce about 150 million pounds of apples annually, and Cheshire County is home to several commercial apple orchards. The technology used for the harvesting of sap and the production of maple sugar changed very little for 150 years until the energy crisis of the 1970s forced maple syrup producers to change their labor-intensive process. With a surge of technological breakthroughs, tubing systems were perfected, taking the sap directly from the tree to the sugar house. Vacuum pumps were added to the tubing systems. Preheaters were developed to recycle heat lost in the steam, and reverse osmosis filters were designed to take a portion of the water out of the sap before it was boiled. Today, about 90,000 gallons of syrup is made in Cheshire County annually. Rubber tire tractors were introduced in 1932, and widespread horse farming essentially came to an end. The introduction and rapid improvement of the tractor meant that one farmer could now farm much more land than before. Farms grew in size and produced much more than the colonial farmer could have dreamed possible. Huge farms were developed far to the west of Cheshire County to meet the food requirements for the nation's and the world's exploding population. Many local farm families simply could not compete economically with the corporate farms of the Midwest. The local farms that remained in business generally did so by specializing their production. Across the country today, more and more farms are finding new ways to market their products and connect to their communities. In Cheshire County, these strategies include selling products directly to consumers, marketing directly to retail outlets, and agritourism. Cheshire County residents, like others, are drawn to foods that are fresh and local. This 21st century cultural phenomenon led to a rise in direct-to-consumer opportunities like pick your own farms, community-supported agriculture programs, and farmers markets. In Cheshire County, about 10% of local farm sales are made directly to members of the community. Farmers markets have become an opportunity for local farmers to sell to loyal customers and to engage the general public. The state of New Hampshire is home to more than 65 local farmers markets. Community-supported agriculture, CSA, is a program by which a group of individuals pledge their support for a local farm so that it becomes the community's farm. Membership fees to the program provide farmers with funds to continue operations year-round and to get paid a salary. Members, in turn, receive shares of the food that is produced. In the past 30 years, the number of CSA programs has grown to more than 6,500 in the United States alone. There are at least 6 active CSAs in Cheshire County in 5 different towns. On a national scale, over 50,000 farms sell directly to retail outlets like stores, hospitals, restaurants, schools, and grocery stores and food co-ops. New Hampshire farmers rank 5th in the nation for the percentage of their direct sales that go to retail outlets. The Cheshire County Conservation District started the Monadnock Menus Initiative to offer weekly collection and delivery of local farm fresh food to wholesale food buyers such as schools, institutions, and businesses. In recent years, local beer, wine, cider, mead, and hard liquor have become available on a larger scale, helped along by the state government's decision to accept New Hampshire-made products in their outlet stores in 1990. Agritourism has now become the fastest growing segment of New Hampshire's agricultural scene today. 1/3 of the $935 million in farm revenues comes from visitors to farms for the purpose of eating a meal, staying overnight, enjoying the farm environment, attending educational programs, and getting actively involved in farm operations. Popular forms of agritourism in the Monadnock region include pick-your-own experiences, farm-to-table events, product tastings, wine tours, Christmas tree farms, hay rides, agricultural fairs and festivals, bed and breakfast inns, and picnicking and hiking on farms. Since the 1990s, consumer demand for organically grown products has increased significantly. Today, 3 out of 4 conventional grocery stores carry organic products, which account for about 4% of total U.S. food sales, more than double what it was a decade ago. Recently, the Monadnock Buy Local Network formed to promote positive economic and community benefits of spending dollars locally while supporting programs and policies that boost a local, green, and fair economy. Business incubator Hannah Grimes Center supports the movement with its agribusiness commitment, partnering with the CCCD and Antioch University, New England, to help Cheshire County farmers develop their business and marketing skills. The percentage of the population involved in farming will never again approach the levels of the 18th and 19th centuries, due largely to the impact of modern technology. But there are now many opportunities for hardworking farmers and discriminating consumers to work together to ensure the success of agriculture in Southwest New Hampshire far into the future. As with agriculture, we need to begin our forestry story a little earlier than 75 years ago. In the late 1800s, the landscape here was growing back to forest from the farmland that had been abandoned by the farmers, quite literally for greener pastures elsewhere. Trees were small and of little interest as a valuable commodity worth managing. By the early 1900s, there were scattered woodlots and quite a bit of logging going on as small sawmills and portable mills were cutting wood for various uses. White pines grew back first and most prolifically in the abandoned pastures. When they matured, they were useful for many of the woodenware products made in the region. Local manufacturers turned out millions upon millions of wooden boxes, pails, and rocking chairs, in addition to countless other products, from ox yokes to baseball bats. However, there wasn't a lot of thought put into managing the forest resources. Most loggers were more interested in exploiting the forest than managing them. Once the white pine was cleared out, hardwood succeeded them, creating a new hardwood forest. Several of the larger woodenware manufacturing firms were interested in forest management, replanting, and regeneration because this would provide them with a constant supply of raw material. Some of these firms acquired large landholdings in the region and harvested their own lumber. Some of these were the New England Box Company, Carey Chair Company, International Paper, and the Stoddard Lumber Company. In 1904, Stoddard Lumber issued a booklet that discussed the forest management that the firm had been practicing for 2 decades, concluding with the statement, "Why should not the forest have as intelligent care and treatment as the wheat field, the vineyard, or the orchard?" Although most individual landowners were not concerned with management of the forest resources, there were exceptions to this, including the Faulkner family of Keene, shown here, who put considerable time and energy into planting and managing stands of specific types of trees. The Yale Forestry School was established in 1900, and the Harvard Forest was established in Petersham, Mass. In 1907, with a graduate program opening there in 1914. Students were trained in forest management and marketing. These 2 programs impacted Cheshire County. In 1919, Harvard students began to use New England Box Company lands in what is now Pisgah State Park as a living laboratory. The Yale Toomey Forest, located in Swansea and Keene, was donated to Yale in the first half of the 20th century and now comprises 1,930 acres. It has also been used as a living laboratory of forest management for graduate students. Over a period of 100 years, from the mid-1800s to the mid-1900s, much of New England went from open agricultural land to closed woodland. The hurricane of 1938 brought increased attention to the region's expanding forests. That famous storm laid flat millions of trees across the region. This is a view of Maple Avenue in Keene after the storm. There was a concerted effort to save that timber, chiefly because it had value. The barracks built at Fort Devens in Massachusetts when World War II began was constructed chiefly of Southwest New Hampshire timber, for example. But local landowners and the government also wanted to clear access roads in the forest and try to clean up the downed and drying trees before fire became a serious threat. They were not entirely successful with that, of course, as the largest forest fire in New Hampshire history burned more than 24,000 acres in several Cheshire County towns in April of 1941. The infestation of white pine blister rust was investigated in a widespread study at about the same time, and also got people thinking about managing the forest around them. Hurricane recovery and blister rust studies encouraged people to think more about managing their forests. International Paper had established some Norway spruce plantations as early as the 1920s, and in the 1940s and 50s there was a push to reclaim old fields with red pine, which grew fast and straight and made good lumber. Some technological aids that were developed helped in the growth of the forestry profession and forest management. Practical and useful chainsaws were developed in the 1950s, making it much easier to accomplish trimming and selective forest improvements. And then the rubber tire skidder was introduced, making access to the land much easier and faster. This region's professional foresters realized by the 1960s that they needed to guide landowners in the use of these new tools. Early local foresters included Bill House, Larry Rathburn, Henry Baldwin, Sarge Goodwin, and John Calhoun, shown here. 53 years ago, the UNH Cooperative Extension Service published its 1967 New Hampshire Forest Market Report. The report suggested that woodland owners who plan to sell forest products should retain the services of a qualified forester to act as their agent, or consult the county forester, who would help examine their woodland and offer recommendations on management. The county forester would also help organize forest improvement programs and guide landowners to government grants for that improvement. The county forester still does all of this and more. Landowners began to realize that a managed forest had more value than one that was ignored or simply stripped with no effort at regeneration. Today, most of the farmland of the 18th and 19th centuries has reverted to forest. More than 84% of New Hampshire is now forested. This means that there are more landowners with more wooded acres to be managed. The region is home to a very professional forestry and logging community. However, there is still just a small number of professional foresters covering a lot of ground, literally. In the state of New Hampshire, there are some 1,850,000 acres that are conserved, most of it forest land, that has or should have management plans. The field of forestry and the logging industry continue to develop. The development of more modern technology continues to impact management and harvesting. This includes things such as whole tree chipping and cut-to-length harvesting equipment. Professional foresters work to make the region's forests healthier, more productive, and better habitat for wildlife. The management practices they implement play an essential role in a state and a county in which the vast majority of the land is forested. Our third topic is closely related to both agriculture and forestry. Cheshire County was the location of some of the first land conservation efforts in the nation. Why has the conservation movement been so successful in the southwest corner of the state? Several factors have influenced that success, chief among them being geography, economics, and people. Authors and artists began to write about and paint images of Mount Monadnock beginning in the 1800s. This combination of words and images fired the imagination of the general public across New England and beyond. Their desire to visit this natural paradise increased as the decades passed, and the region's tourist industry was born. When the town of Jaffrey acquired 200 acres on the summit of Monadnock in 1884, it was apparently the first formal effort at land conservation in the region. The selectmen expressed their thoughts on the issue with a statement that they believed it to be the wish of the town that Mount Monadnock be forever free to the public as a place of resort for pleasure. President Theodore Roosevelt was a lover of nature and the outdoors. He viewed professional forestry practices as a means of preserving forests while also making them available for use. In short, managing and regenerating the nation's forests so that the wood resources could be used over and over again. At the same time, we would conserve natural areas for public enjoyment and use. During his presidency, national forests were enlarged by 130 million acres. Although mass consumption and urban development were still viewed as essential elements of economic progress, policies of the progressive era set in motion ideas that would shape the nation's future environmental policies. Hundreds of acres had been preserved on Monadnock by the time the CCCD was founded in the 1940s. But a new threat to the mountain occurred in 1944 when the town of Jaffrey voted to lease its 200 acres at the summit to a radio company to erect a radio tower there and build a tramway from the halfway house to the summit. Local residents were outraged and formed the Association to Protect Mount Monadnock. The group's description of the problem showed how important the mountain had become in the region. Quote, "If this project is carried through, it would destroy or at best greatly impair the aesthetic and spiritual values of the mountain, one of the most famous and said to be the best loved mountains of New England. It would largely nullify the long years of effort to preserve the wooded slopes and bold rock ledges of Monadnock in their wild state, and to save the natural beauty and inspiration that generations have already enjoyed for those who will come after us," end quote. They convinced the town not to lease the land, and there has been no question since that time that Monadnock should remain in its natural state. Today, more than 12,000 contiguous acres on and around the mountain are conserved, unavailable for development, and mostly open for the enjoyment and recreation of the public. This has been accomplished through a partnership of town, state, nonprofit, and private land ownership and stewardship. By working together, these entities have preserved Monadnock in its natural state for all to enjoy. But Monadnock was only one of many successful conservation efforts. The town of Keene was becoming conscious of the interest in and need for natural areas that were available to the public at about the same time that conservation was getting underway on the mountain. In Keene, the town fathers, encouraged by the work of local naturalist George Wheelock, realized the importance of preserving open green space for the psychological well-being of the residents amid the urban development and industrialization in their city. Today, the city of Keene has 17 public parks containing more than 1,100 acres of open space. Furthermore, the city sits in a valley and the city has worked diligently to protect the green space on the hillsides that surround the city to maintain its attractive rural character. In the surrounding countryside, there was little thought of land conservation in the early 1900s, however. The residents there were more concerned with supporting their families and surviving economically. The result of all the abandoned farmland was thousands of acres of land that was available inexpensively if a buyer could be found, or land that was simply available by paying back taxes to the towns as a means of taking ownership of the abandoned farms. These properties were not totally worthless, however, and that is where the conservation story begins. The abandoned farms began to revert to forest and, as mentioned earlier, enterprising sawmill and woodenware factory owners took advantage of this. Several of them acquired large tracts of land very inexpensively as a means of supplying their mills with a steady flow of trees. Furthermore, some outside visitors to the region wanted more privacy and control over the time they spent here than was possible at the grand hotels, such as the Halfway House on Mount Monadnock. Consequently, they began to purchase some of the abandoned farmhouses to use as summer retreats and hunting camps. Dublin became a summer escape for well-known politicians, artists, authors, and businessmen, some of whom purchased large properties for their retreats. Lewis Cabot of Boston thought nothing of buying a few hundred acres of land to preserve the birds, fish, and small game that were his own sport. Some estimates suggested that his land holdings in Dublin, Nelson, Harrisville, Antrim, Hancock, Stoddard, and Washington grew to tens of thousands of acres. So logging and recreation resulted in numerous tracts of land, thousands of acres in size, especially in the hill towns, which were the location of so many hundreds of abandoned farms. When the woodenware industry died out, the land remained with the owners' families or was occasionally sold to other businesses, such as the Public Service Company of New Hampshire, which acquired property along local lakes and rivers in an effort to control water rights for power generation. And there were the families that truly loved the natural landscape and could adopt their own piece of heaven by acquiring some of these tracts. The end result of all of this was that there were numerous large landholdings in the region as the mid-20th century arrived. Most of these properties were not conserved or protected in any way, however. The transition from one generation to the next, or a change in business strategy, such as the public service companies' move away from water power to fossil fuels, might result in development of these properties and the permanent loss of irreplaceable natural areas at any time. Luckily, a change in the public mindset and a growing appreciation for the importance of the preservation of wild land in the 1960s and 1970s occurred at just the right time. Several factors combined to culminate in hundreds of conservation tracts containing tens of thousands of acres of land in southwest New Hampshire. The first of these was the Back to Nature movement in the 1970s. More and more people were searching for an alternative lifestyle, away from the hectic pace and the crowds of the urban centers. Cheshire County seemed like an oasis to many of these people. At about the same time, some parts of southeast New Hampshire were experiencing rapid, unchecked, and in some cases totally unplanned business and industrial growth. This caught the attention of the residents from the southwestern corner of the state. If we wanted to maintain our rural heritage and have a say in what our communities would look like in the future, we had to plan ahead. Furthermore, over the next decade, several Monadnock region farms were lost to development. The level and relatively rock-free farmlands were the best surviving spaces for residential development as the population of the county continued to expand. The Monadnock region stood at a crossroads, and those who loved its small-town character and rural heritage planned and worked diligently to preserve them. Town conservation commissions were introduced in the 1960s. The state of New Hampshire acquired several parcels that were preserved as state parks, forests, or natural areas, and the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests worked diligently to protect natural areas in Cheshire County and across the state. In 1971, the Forest Society negotiated its first conservation easement, changing the complexion of land conservation in the state. Such easements allow landowners to keep their land while preventing future development. The use of conservation easements exploded in the 1980s, here and across the country. There were soon many local successes to build upon. The descendants of the Dickinson family that had compiled a 13,300-acre tract in the southern part of the county for the New England Box Company worked with the state of New Hampshire to ensure that the land would be conserved. The result was the formation of Pisgah State Park in 1968, the largest state park in New Hampshire. In 1978, Betty Babcock of Woodbury, Long Island, donated the 3,500-acre Charles Peirce Reservation in Stoddard to the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests. This was the Forest Society's second largest holding, behind only Mount Monadnock, and it opened the door for many other conservation projects in Stoddard over the next 3 decades. Speaking of Monadnock, the mountain is one of the most successful collaborative land conservation efforts in the country, and has been designated a national natural landmark. It is one of the most climbed mountains in the world, attracting around 100,000 hikers annually. Visitors are attracted by the natural beauty of the more than 12,000 acres of public and private conserved land on the mountain. The village of Nelson Center is a quintessential historic village of the type that heritage tourists search for in their travels. The village has experienced only minor alterations since the Civil War. The town realized that the village itself would probably be preserved, but there was concern about the potential development of the land immediately surrounding the town center. Consequently, the townspeople worked for several years to successfully obtain conservation easements on the privately held land surrounding the village to ensure its preservation in perpetuity. When the Faulkner family faced a generational change in land ownership in Stoddard, they developed a conservation easement on the 11,000-acre Andorra forest there. Most of the land is available to the public for hiking and other recreational purposes. This is a view from their Hubbard Hill blueberry fields. Andorra Forest is the centerpiece of an amazingly successful land conservation chronicle in the town of Stoddard. Through the efforts and support of the state of New Hampshire, Town of Stoddard, Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests, Harris Center for Conservation Education, Sweetwater Trust, Audubon Society, Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, Monadnock Conservancy, Nature Conservancy, and many private landowners and resident volunteers, approximately 2/3 of the land in Stoddard is now conserved. That is the highest percentage of any town in the state south of the White Mountains. There are numerous governmental and nonprofit agencies available to assist landowners with land conservation efforts in the Monadnock region and beyond. Most of the towns in the region have town conservation commissions, several of which are active in land conservation. The state of New Hampshire oversees 19 state parks, forests, and natural areas containing more than 19,000 acres in the southwest corner of the state. This is a view at Chesterfield Gorge. The Forest Society manages or oversees dozens of properties and tens of thousands of acres in the region. Since 1970, the Harris Center for Conservation Education has worked on conserving land and educating the public across the region. The centerpiece of its conservation effort is the 33,000-acre super sanctuary, clustered in 8 towns in the region, providing vital wildlife habitat. The Monadnock Conservancy has permanently protected 21,000 acres in 29 towns throughout the region during its brief 30-year history. Perhaps most importantly, the conservation success story in southwest New Hampshire would have been impossible without the support and passion of the private landowners who have donated land or easements on tens of thousands of acres of the land that they love, from forests, fields, mountains, and brooks to swamps, farms, ponds, and islands. By 2003, the Ashwellet River watershed contained more than 63,000 acres, or 99 square miles of conservation land. That was 23% of all the land in the region, and the number has increased dramatically over the past 17 years. These natural lands attract visitors who come to hike, boat, fish, hunt, and enjoy the outdoors. The parking lots at Monadnock State Park and the Pitcher Mountain Fire Tower often overflow with vehicles. These visitors come from near and far, and they shop in local stores, eat in local restaurants, stay in local hotels, buy gasoline at local gas stations, and attend local cultural events. In short, they have a major positive impact on the local economy. In addition to recreation, conservation land can also be used for logging and agriculture, providing income for landowners, loggers, and the towns in which the lands are located. The course of the conservation movement in the small towns was a fascinating story that resulted from an accident of geography and economics, resulting in areas ripe for land conservation when the right time arrived. Succeeding generations of owners of these large tracts often added to and fiercely protected their land in the region's small towns. When the threat of development finally arrived in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, these people invested their time, talent, wealth, and passion to preserve the land for the benefit of future generations. The end result of this drive and passion was that the Monadnock region has experienced one of the most successful collaborative land conservation movements in the nation. Public and private interests have conserved more than 100 square miles of land in an effort to preserve the rural character and heritage of the region. This land is permanently conserved as natural space that will not be developed and can be enjoyed by future generations. These properties are the jewels of the Monadnock region landscape. They are enjoyed for boating, fishing, hiking, snowshoeing, or simply for watching trees, waves, birds, and wildlife. These natural areas attract visitors from near and far who come for relaxation, recreation, clean air, clean water, and natural beauty. Thanks to careful planning and protection of the land, it will be available to wildlife and to people for generations to come. This is a view of Monadnock from the top of Pitcher Mountain in Stoddard. So how do the interconnected successes in small, sustainable local farms, forest management throughout the region, and collaborative land conservation projects relate to the Cheshire County Conservation District and its 75th anniversary? The mission of the CCCD is to promote the conservation and responsible use of the region's natural and agricultural resources for the people of Cheshire County by providing technical, financial, and educational assistance. Excuse me. The organization encourages stewardship for healthy soils, productive, ecologically sound farms, diverse wildlife, productive, sustainable forests, healthy watersheds, and clean water to ensure those resources are available for future generations. You can see how the history of agriculture, forestry, and land conservation in the region tie into the work that they do and how history helps to inform and encourage their work. The CCCD's programs, events, and services deal with soil, farm equipment, farm viability, water, wildlife, conservation planning, forest management activities, and numerous other activities. The CCCD has been working with local landowners for 7.5 decades. The environments they are working to preserve have been threatened more and more in recent decades, but the Conservation District's successes speak for themselves and will undoubtedly continue to do so over the next 75 years. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Alan. What a wonderful presentation. We are so lucky to have you here tonight celebrating 75 years of conservation with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, before we close things out for the evening, we're going to go back to Alan and Frank as Alan shares a few more stories and answers a couple select questions that we pulled out for him.
So the Cheshire Place in Rindge, where the New Hampshire Country School is located, actually began sort of as a utopian community. There was a fellow named Jones Wilder who had been in Rindge as a young man in the mid-1800s. And he'd started some milling, but he was a bit of a failure, so he left town and went elsewhere to try his hand at finding his fortune. And then he got involved with the Butterick Pattern Company, clothing patterns, and he became very wealthy. So the story is he went back to Rindge to prove that he could be successful. And he set up this utopian community. It was a huge place with big barns and lots of animals and a large boarding house. He had lots of workmen working on it to build it, stone walls and various structures. And he was going to sell milk and other farm produce there out of Rindge. This was in the late 1800s. Unfortunately, right after he finished it, or maybe even just before he finished it, he passed away. So he never got to operate his utopian community, but all of his huge buildings were there. His son owned it for a while and then sold it out of the family, and it's being used by Hampshire Country School. My family has lived in Stoddard since 1770, so there are lots of family stories, and they were farmers. And when the farms died in the late 1800s, they just weren't really smart enough to leave, or they loved the land so much that they stayed. The population of Stoddard as a farming community peaked in population in 1820, very early, with 1,203 people. And then it went downhill rapidly as the farms died out and there was competition from farms to the west. And by 1930, there were only 113 people left in Stoddard, with hundreds of abandoned farms. But my family stayed. My great-grandparents, who married in 1896, received the family farm, and it had essentially gone back to a subsistence farm by that point, just growing what they could to survive. So they had the farmhouse. They survived by selling eggs and butter and whatever other income they could get. But all the farms around them became abandoned, and they were sort of alone in the wilderness trying to survive on this family farm in the rocky hills of Stoddard. And today, there is no house there. The farmhouse is gone. I remember it from when I was younger, but it's gone back to forest once again. So it was cleared for farming in the 1820s, and now it's back to forest again.
Wow. Well, that's a good mirror of, I think, probably the rest of
Much
Cheshire
of the
County.
region. Yes.
Right.
My great-grandparents are a good example here again. They needed extra income, so people often worked from home doing outwork or piecework. So my family actually weaved chair seats and backs for some of the local rocking chair mills in the region. So they'd take home the rattan and they would weave it on the frame, take it back, receive a few pennies for that. and do the same. And that was especially done in the winter when they weren't working as much on the farm. But there were other forms of outwork. People also weaved the rattan onto bottles made in the local glass factories to protect them in shipping. And palm leaf hat business, the palm leaf hat business was quite important here in the first half of the 1800s. The local storekeepers would import palm leaf from the port of Boston, and then the farmers' wives and daughters would go to the village store. They would buy this for a small amount of money, take it home, weave these straw hats for use in the fields and so forth. And then they would take them back to the store and get store credit. So they would receive money essentially in return, and they could buy whatever they wanted at the store. In a single store in Nelson, they made almost 7,000 hats in 1 year. Wow. So you know that they weren't selling all of those in Nelson. They were shipping these out. They were going to the south to be used in the fields and to the factories in the larger towns, but it was extra income for these people. Another type of enterprise that has sort of come back to the region is we originally had craftspeople, people who would make shoes or they would make furniture in addition to doing their farming. So those things died out when we got the larger factories with larger employees and more machines to do the work. So the skilled craftsmen and the small shops started to disappear. But now we have people who are doing work by hand once again. We sell a lot of locally made crafts and products here in the Historical Society Museum store, for example, and Hannah Grimes does the same, and there are others that do that. So people are able to work at home, get some extra income, and sell locally to local customers. Water power in the region, which goes back before 75 years ago, but that was one reason that the Connecticut River Valley became a manufacturing center, because of the geography and the many brooks and streams and rivers here. We had water dropping, which could be used to turn water wheels, and we had lots and lots of small mills and then lots of larger factories. Woodenware was probably the biggest industry here, but textiles was important to the local economy as well, because we had the natural resources. We had the timber, we had the wool from the sheep, and then we had the water to power the mills. We didn't have huge rivers, so we don't have anything like Lowell on the Merrimack. They simply had more water and they could power more mills. But Harrisville is a wonderful example of a 19th century mill town that survives in essentially unaltered form. So if you want to see more about milling history, I would visit the town of Harrisville, because it really hasn't changed much in the last 150 years as far as construction, and it's well preserved, and there's great milling heritage there. I have one more conservation story that I will share. Great. I have shared it before, and it's kind of a fun one. In my presentation, I talked briefly about Lewis Cabot, who was one of the wealthiest men in the country. He was, as a young man, was very interested in hunting and fishing. And he came out from Boston and he bought tens of thousands of acres of abandoned farms out here, because they were growing back from pasture into brush and small forests, and that was wonderful for wildlife and especially for bird habitat. So he would just come out and buy land sight unseen, and some reports indicate that he eventually purchased almost 100,000 acres of land throughout southwestern New Hampshire. There's a story of him hunting in the woods of Nelson one day. He was on an old town road that had been abandoned, and he was walking along the road, and he saw some great land beside the road that was growing back from pasture, and he thought it would be great for hunting, so he wanted to buy it. So he kept walking down the road with his gun, and he came upon a farm and an old farmer outside. And he stopped and he said, I'm interested in buying this land across the road. He said, "You think you'd like to sell it to me?" And the guy said, "No, can't do that." And Cabot said, well, why why not? He said, well, I don't own it. He said, oh, well, can you tell me who owns it? I'd like to talk to the guy. And the farmer looked at him and he said, oh, some rich old cuss out of Boston named McCabe. So he bought so much land, he didn't even know that he already owned the land across the street. But Lewis Cabot is remembered here today because the Lewis Cabot Preserve is between Spoonwood and Newbanoosuc in Cheshire County today. So he's remembered in conservation. So his tens of thousands of acres, a lot of it turned into conservation land because it was big tracts of land.
Right. That's a great story. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amy Bodwell, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Conservation District. I want to thank you for participating in our virtual annual meeting anniversary. It wasn't ideal, nor as much fun, but at least we were able to share all that's going on at the Conservation District in 2020. A big thank you to Alan for sharing his knowledge of the conservation history of Cheshire County. We live in an incredible place, and hearing about the past only accentuates that. I'd also like to congratulate awardees this year, Wingate Farm and Steve Roberge, celebrating those who continue to shape our future. Practices and education efforts is a privilege for us. As you've just heard, D has had a busy and productive, sustainable and eco-friendly place to live. We have amazing farms and farmers, forest, markets, nation land, and practices. Let's keep building that in the future. Thank you for your ongoing support. We cannot do your help. Stay safe, be well. Hope to see you in person next year.